A powerful, relentless hurricane hits the Houston, Texas area. Just as a beautiful mother of two vanishes.
It was hell on earth because we had two disasters happening side by side.
Harvey is the most significant tropical cyclone rainfall event in U.S. history. No doubt about it.
Forced into a state of emergency, will investigators be able to rescue their own community and uncover the truth behind this woman's disappearance?
Weather created the opportunity for the perfect crime. However, in the end, weather also helped solve this case.
Breaking news from the National Hurricane.
It was an event that most Texans won't soon forget. For 4 grueling days in August of 2017, Hurricane Harvey punished the Lone Star State with continual rain that left devastating flooding for weeks after the storm was long gone.
Aerial shots showing square mile after square mile underwater, obviously getting into people's homes, rescues by boat. It happened very quickly.
So Hurricane Harvey did $125 billion of damage. Records were all blown out of the water. The amount of rain that fell was just unbelievable.
Harvey would make landfall near Rockport, Texas, around 10 p.m. on Friday, August 25th. While the Category 4 winds were over 150 miles away, the deluge of flooding rain was just beginning for Baytown, Texas, a town of 75,000, 1 hour east of Houston in Chambers County. While thousands contemplate evacuation, the Chambers County Sheriff's Office receives a call from a man named Jeff Walters, concerned about his 37-year-old niece, Crystal Surratt McDowell, a local real estate agent.
Jeff worked at the same real estate company, and he had told us that every morning Crystal, on her way to work, would send him a text. And this one day, she failed to send that text, and he was pretty emotional about it.
She had a closing schedule that she never met with her clients. Clients never heard from her. That's not Crystal.
Jeff said, I've been trying to contact her. I'm not getting any reply, which was out of character. So he contacted us just to do a welfare check at her residence.
The door is answered by someone unexpected. Her ex-husband, Stephen McDowell.
He told me that they were divorced for several months, but sometimes it's still living together. It kind of struck me as odd.
The deputy asked Steve if he knows where Crystal might be.
And he said that the last time he saw her was Wednesday, a few days prior to this.
It had been planned that she was going to come to the house to get the kids. He said she never showed up.
He told me that he thought she was going out towards, I believe, the Dallas area to get away from the storm. Sometimes in this business, you got to go with your gut feeling, and unfortunately, it just seemed a little off at that time.
Deputy Haynes returns to the sheriff's office to assist with emergency weather planning while raising concern about what he's learned.
There was something that made him feel like there was more to this story, so then we immediately started working on the case. The hurricane, obviously, we were monitoring it, but I'm one of those that's kind of an all hands on deck. If somebody's missing, I started, inquiring and looking into who she was.
Born in October 1979, Crystal Surratt was raised in Baytown, Texas.
She lost both of her parents at a very young age. She was raised by several different relatives, but ultimately Jeff Walters, her uncle, became her parent.
The difficult start to her life did not hold her back from becoming an outgoing, charismatic adult.
She was very attractive. She would capture the room when she walked in it, very outgoing, not shy at all.
She was a happy-go-lucky person. There were so many things she wanted to see and do, and she just took action and did it.
I'm ready. Okay. Do this.
With an irresistible charm and an eagerness to see the world, Crystal became a flight attendant. But she still kept Baytown as home base and found time for romance. When at 25 years old, she fell hard for 32-year-old warehouse worker, Steve McDowell.
When they got together, she really was in love with him. They seemed like they were happy.
After more than 2 years of dating, the couple tied the knot on April 14, 2007, and moved into a modest townhouse in Baytown. 2 children soon followed, a boy, Madden, and a girl, Maui.
She had these 2 children. They adored her, and they were the love of her life.
In 2016, after 15 years in the air, Crystal decided to make a change so she could spend more time with her family. She followed in the footsteps of her Uncle Jeff, who worked at a local real estate firm.
She was an up-and-coming star. She was making 6 figures a year, selling homes.
Crystal drove a Mercedes-Benz. It was a Class C, very nice.
She was not a materialistic type person. That girl worked more than any of us. The car kind of symbolized how hard she worked. That meant a lot to her.
Unfortunately, while her career was thriving, Crystal's marriage was not.
She was having problems at home. She and her husband, Steve, they really were more like roommates instead of husband and wife.
By 2017, after 10 years of marriage, Crystal officially filed for divorce. But by all appearances, the breakup was amicable, and the 2 agreed to share custody of their young children. Since there was now a disparate difference in their incomes, Crystal even agreed to assist Steve financially.
She had bought him that house so their kids could be in a certain school district.
Crystal had planned to keep the townhouse for herself, but was still occasionally staying in the downstairs bedroom of Steve's new home.
The townhome that they had lived in prior, she was having it completely remodeled.
She felt comfortable to still live with her ex-husband. It goes back to Crystal's children. She just wanted to make sure that they still had their mom and their dad, and not to let the divorce affect them in a traumatic way.
And it was no secret to her ex-husband, Steve, that Crystal had even opened herself up to dating other men.
She moved on fairly quickly after the divorce. I mean, she even wrote online, "I'm the happiest I've ever been. God is good."
Yet within 2 days of making the post, she disappears, just as major weather looms.
It really has only just begun for us, and it's going to be a rain event for the duration.
But as Hurricane Harvey is bearing down on the Texas coast and moving closer to Baytown, local law enforcement hopes Crystal is just taking shelter from the storm.
There were a number of people that had evacuated. We were obviously all hoping that we would locate her in Dallas or Nashville or wherever.
But some investigators will soon have their doubts.
You think in 1,000 different scenarios, but something wasn't right.
So when it comes to weather, it can create opportunities for people. It's a way to commit the perfect crime.
Is she in a hospital? Did she get carjacked?
And it will become increasingly clear that the storm is going to be much worse than anyone expected.
Oh my goodness, it's a Category 4 hurricane.
We were getting ready for something horrible.
The arrival of Harvey to Baytown, Texas, occurs shortly after authorities have begun investigating the missing persons case of Crystal McDowell.
Harvey was a bit of a late bloomer. It originated as a weather disturbance off the coast of Africa. Went along kind of innocuously over the tropical Atlantic. Not until it got to the Gulf of Mexico, that's where the waters were ultra warm. And it went from tropical depression to landfalling Cat 4 in just 2.5 days.
A lot of meteorologists break the hurricane up into quadrants, but in general, the northeast quadrant is the most powerful. And if you look at how Hurricane Harvey hit the coast of Texas, that quadrant was that whole Houston and east area.
Making sense of just what happened to the missing mother of 2 is proving to be as frustrating as anticipating the impact of the storm.
We knew ahead of time that Harvey was going to come ashore as a strong hurricane, and we had the potential for heavy rainfall and an inland flooding disaster. But I don't think anybody knew how high those rainfall totals would get.
It's a difficult situation because here we have this one phone call with a missing person, but did she try and evacuate? And then the other side of the coin is, did something really bad happen?
If someone was going to kill Crystal, Hurricane Harvey provided the perfect opportunity. During this time, people would be focused on storm preparation. It was essentially the perfect cover.
Meanwhile, the decision is made to assign Crystal's case to lead detective Donnie Walters.
I was the on-call investigator that weekend. I was real sure that something was wrong.
First thing on Detective Walters' agenda is to speak with Crystal's Uncle Jeff, who called in the missing persons report earlier that day.
Her uncle, Jeff, some of the things he had told us, he had his fears because she was very repetitive all the time. Always prompt, always on time.
As with most missing person cases, sometimes it's just people, for whatever reason, they just decide to pick up and leave.
I just didn't see her just dropping everything and leaving. She had 2 beautiful kids.
While police still had to consider that Crystal evacuated without telling anyone, it seemed out of character.
This wasn't an ordinary missing persons case.
Anticipating the worst possibilities, initial questions focus on Crystal's ex-husband, Steve McDowell.
And so naturally, you're going to start on the inside and work your way out.
Uncle Jeff tells the detective that while Crystal is recently divorced from Steve, he feels the police should spend more time looking at Crystal's dating life.
She was a beautiful woman. She was in 2 industries, real estate and airline, where you meet a lot of people. Maybe she had other suitors wanting to do something bad to her.
But there is one person in particular that Jeff thinks police should look at first, a man named Paul Hargrave.
He said that Paul was her boyfriend at the time. They were dating and had been dating, I think, for right around a month.
And he referred to him as weird. And they were like, well, what is it about him? He was like, I don't know. The guy just kind of creeps me out.
But before meeting with Crystal's new love interest, Detective Walters chooses to speak with the man she was leaving behind. Steve McDowell repeats that Crystal was to pick up the kids and take them to Dallas. He says the last time he heard from Crystal was an innocuous text she sent him at 7:10 a.m. as she left the home of her new boyfriend, Paul Hargrave. But Steve claims she never arrived, and he was home all day with the kids. When asked about her new boyfriend, Crystal's ex admits he knew they had just started dating.
It was, oh, well, it's nothing wrong with it. He said he was okay with her seeing other people.
Steve told authorities that right now was just simply a rough patch, and he felt confident that they would get back together.
In fact, the whole family was even planning a vacation.
Crystal and Stephen had planned a cruise where they were going to carry the kids, the family, everybody was going to go.
And he was intending on trying to talk her into remarrying him on this cruise that they were going to go on.
Steve seems sincere, but detectives can't help wondering if he's hiding something.
Plus, he was sort of monotone. He never broke down. If I'd been married to somebody, I would have felt something, I believe, if she would have just disappeared all of a sudden.
The interview with Steve comes to an end, but the investigation into Crystal's disappearance will only intensify, just as the storm outside is strengthening.
Not until Saturday the 26th and into Sunday the 27th, that's when we got the really persistent heavy rain. Those 2 days, each were 2 of the top 5 rainiest days in Houston history. And it wasn't over yet.
As detectives turn their attention to Crystal's new boyfriend, Paul Hargrave, the investigation and the storm are about to get more unpredictable than ever.
And the clock is ticking. Things are getting worse and worse.
If someone is looking at harming Crystal McDowell, Hurricane Harvey was The perfect way to get away with it. All the rain that was in the forecast, if she was alive, how would they find her?
As Baytown wakes to an unyielding downpour of rain and massive flooding, the Chambers County Sheriff's Office fears foul play is involved in the missing persons case of Crystal McDowell.
We only had about a 12-hour window where detectives started the investigation, and then we just started having devastating flooding.
The Sheriff's Office jumps into rescue mode while battling torrential downpours.
When Harvey came ashore as a Category 4, it was a pretty well-organized system, but as it went ashore, it was no longer a hurricane less than a day after landfall. But as it sat east of San Antonio to set up this nearly stationary pattern in the atmosphere that kept dumping rain.
Wasn't quote-unquote your classic hurricane. Because of the fact that it stalled out, it just sat over the area.
We had high water vehicles and boats. Our priorities are people that are having water rise up in their house, get them to safety while on top of doing an investigation.
Still, Chambers County deputies follow standard protocol in hopes of finding Crystal still alive.
We did contact the phone company to see if we can't get a GPS location of her phone, but at the time it was turned off.
Investigators also check her bank and credit card statements, but there's been no activity since she was last seen, leading police to believe that she did not attempt to evacuate the area. They then turned to more sinister possibilities.
They did check all of the hospitals to see if she was there, but she wasn't.
Investigators then consider if Crystal was the victim of a kidnapping or carjacking, but quickly rule them out, as extreme weather events traditionally bring a dramatic drop in the rate of those types of random crimes.
One doesn't usually think of people committing crimes right before a hurricane. You think of criminal activity occurring after the event when looting and that sort of thing occurs. So really carjacking or anything along those lines didn't make sense.
The same logic is applied to most of her potential suitors.
Between law enforcement speaking with her friends and family and also looking at her social media accounts, they deduced that there were quite a number of men that were interested in her. But because of the weather coming in, they were able to rule many of them out right away. People were evacuating and taking care of the families.
But one man they have yet to rule out is new love interest Paul Hargrave. Upon bringing him in for questioning, he confirms that he was with Crystal the night before she disappeared.
So Paul Hargrave's side of the story was that he knew that Crystal was going to go pick up her kids, but he wasn't quite sure then what she was going to do.
He says she left Friday morning around 7 a.m. to pick up her kids before the storm, and she texted him from her car. Paul claims he responded, but never heard back. While his words make sense, his demeanor strikes investigators as overly defensive.
So even though Crystal is still just a missing person, if she is found murdered or dead, Paul is really putting it out there that he had nothing to do with it.
He even goes as far as to promise to soon bring officials security surveillance video that proves she left his home safe and sound. And he is quick to paint a very different picture of Crystal's relationship with Steve McDowell, a description that goes back to the start of the marriage in 2007.
She originally filed for divorce in 2008, but she just kept holding on because of the horrendous guilt that Steve would put on her, all the way to I'm going to commit suicide.
Paul claims the emotional manipulation continued for 9 long years.
So she stayed in the marriage. However, in 2017, she found the courage to file for divorce.
When asked about the upcoming family cruise, Paul revealed that Crystal had recently asked Steve not to go because she wanted Paul to go instead.
She had taken him off the guest list, so to speak. So some of those things were surfacing that were obviously important to us.
The detectives realize someone isn't telling the truth. The question is, who? And as the weather continues to worsen, the national media descends upon the Houston area and picks up on Crystal's story. As coverage of her case makes headlines, investigators notice Crystal's Uncle Jeff seems to be consistently front and center.
It was almost like he was trying to pull some distraction, that he was this concerned person versus maybe somebody that actually had something to do with it. Initially, we thought it was best intentions, but he truly was a person of interest.
As the second day of the investigation comes to a close, authorities will continue to look into 3 prime people of interest: Crystal's ex, Stephen McDowell, her new boyfriend, Paul Hargrave, and her uncle, Jeff Walters.
At first, it was just, this is a missing persons case, and then it began to progress. The longer she was missing, at some point, this is going to end up in a murder case.
But officials are about to make a discovery that will show how weather can serve as the perfect roadblock to justice.
It certainly was a unique opportunity to cover up such a heinous crime.
Or how it can help catch a killer. Despite technically being downgraded to a tropical storm, Harvey is at its worst as it hovers over the Houston area. Particularly hard hit is the city of Baytown, 1 hour to the east.
The magnitude and the scope of this flooding disaster were completely unprecedented. A lot of people lost power. It did leave a lot of people in flooded communities without air conditioning, without a way to cook. When people get isolated and help can't come, the primary goal is life safety.
But it's not just the storm that has troubled the Chambers County Sheriff's Office. In addition to providing order to a struggling community, they are attempting to solve the missing persons case and possible homicide of Crystal McDowell.
3 or 4 days into the investigation, authorities were able to go from 9 suspects down to 3. Her ex-husband, Steve, Paul, her new boyfriend, and her Uncle Jeff.
We were stretched pretty thin. This was a big case. We're still getting hammered with the storm.
I mean, we had elected officials that were losing their homes. We had police losing their homes, EMT losing their homes.
And then, of course, the weather also took out the lead detective's house.
I was still there, I was still working, but that's when I started doing double time, back and forth between this case and trying to get my home, my family, secured.
Even still, the weather did not stop the Chambers County Sheriff's Office.
Law enforcement actually continued working on this case throughout the entire major weather event, which shows how diligent they were and how committed they were to solving this missing persons case.
So weather can create the perfect opportunity for someone to essentially get away with murder. However, severe weather can also help solve crimes.
And that's exactly what is about to happen. When authorities get a surprise call about an intriguing piece of evidence, Crystal's prized Mercedes.
Her car was located in a motel parking lot. It was found by some family members that were searching her out.
With several feet of water already on the ground and as much as 4 inches falling per hour, making the 10-minute trip take significantly longer.
We left the office, and due to the water, it took us about 45 minutes to get there. That's how difficult things was.
And with the delays comes pressure to process the vehicle as quickly as possible before critical evidence is lost.
When crimes are committed, authorities tend to look for footprints or fingerprints, and with the type of weather, it can literally wash away all those clues.
Upon examining the car, police confirm the car is indeed Crystal's, erasing any lingering possibility the woman had safely evacuated in advance of the storm.
For her car to just be found in the area that it was in, there was no way that would have ever happened. Crystal just did not leave her vehicle just anywhere.
It looked like somebody had parked it in a little bit of a hurry. The vehicle was still not damaged yet, but the water was rising very quickly.
To detectives, The location is a possible sign that foul play was involved in Crystal's disappearance.
It was not typical of Crystal to just take off like that, but then to leave an expensive car like that and no trace of anything. It does not make any sense for somebody to leave it parked at a motel along a busy highway. But considering those circumstances, plus the storm, none of it added up to anything good.
And unfortunately, getting any forensic evidence from the car itself proves challenging because of the flooding.
It washes away a lot of evidence. The hood was almost underwater there in that parking lot.
Looking at past cases, when floodwaters come in, first of all, rainwater isn't this clean water that people think of. And then on top of it, once it hits the ground, there's dirt and oil. All of a sudden, the water is quite dirty. There are a lot of chemicals in the waters.
And because of the destructive characteristics of rainwater, no fingerprints or DNA can be successfully collected anywhere from the car. Additionally, neither Crystal's purse nor her phone can be found inside the vehicle. But investigators do find one important clue that sheds some light on why the car might be there. Sitting in plain view on the dashboard of Crystal's unlocked car are her keys.
You're not going to leave a high-dollar Mercedes-Benz with a set of keys sitting up on the dashboard. It was way out of place. Someone wanted that car stolen.
It's real obvious to us that who had parked the car there and left the keys in open view. They had really hoped that somebody would get in the car and drive to New Orleans with it, or get in the car and drive to the other side of Houston in.
Since it is now clear the car was abandoned in hopes of making evidence disappear, police are confident they're dealing with a murder case.
Harvey was the perfect way to get away with murder. The killer thought the car would be stolen.
But just as the weather has hindered forensic analysis of the car by washing away evidence, it has also helped keep someone's plan from going perfectly.
The water had gotten into the car. So you could not steal the car at the time because you wouldn't have been able to get it out of the parking lot.
Had the weather not been there, that car would have been gone.
If authorities are to find out the truth about Crystal McDowell, they need to know more about how and who dumped Crystal's car.
So we started collecting all of the forensic video that we could come across that had anything to do with that area.
Investigators canvass local businesses for access to security footage that points to the dump site. But it's a difficult task with the rising waters.
Some of these businesses took on not inches of water, but feet. Some of them, the water got so high that it ruined their DVR systems.
Initial efforts go nowhere, but authorities refuse to give up hope. Still, it's not enough for Crystal's Uncle Jeff.
He was questioning how fast the case was moving along. So authorities are like, is there something to this?
The suspicion only heightens when Jeff Walters hires a private investigator. And that PI searches Crystal's townhouse for clues before the police can.
The problem that we were having is they had already gone in and done certain things that we had not done yet.
If you think about it, everyone's affected by weather. Even judges, they had to deal with their families' emergency situations. So it took a few days for law enforcement to obtain a warrant to get into Crystal's house.
So I will tell you that the uncle truly was a person of interest. He was getting in the way of the investigation.
But Uncle Jeff isn't the only one acting suspiciously. Crystal's new boyfriend, Paul Hargrave, has joined him as a regular fixture in news media.
He's trying to tell the world of how much he loves this woman, that he's going to marry her.
That was probably the biggest red flag. He wanted to convince the media first instead of coming to us.
And he's not just talking. He's given the media his home surveillance video of Crystal the morning she disappeared, something he has yet to do with police.
We learned literally from a national news station that they had photographs and pictures that we didn't have. So obviously he became high on my suspect list.
But the ongoing canvassing of area businesses is about to pay off big time for detectives.
So once we started collecting the different videos, and we started realizing that this person of interest is the one that we need to continue to keep looking at.
While the storm is dying down, The battle against the flooding of Harvey still has a long way to go.
We felt like we had the right guy, but it was very important to us that we get the body located.
Will the weather let a killer walk away with murder?
This neighborhood, where rescues are happening nonstop, flooded more than 10 feet in areas in mere hours, an example of the disaster and its fury.
As Harvey slowly moves out of the state of Texas, there is only devastation in its wake.
After meandering inland for the weekend and then early the following week, keeping the heavy rainfall over southeast Texas, finally, it started to move north and losing its tropical characteristics.
Although the storm has passed, its impact can still be felt as the Chambers County Sheriff's Office works the case of Crystal McDowell.
When that much water is sitting on land and has to all drain into the Gulf of Mexico, it's not going to happen overnight. And even after that, the debris left behind and the impacts left behind continued for weeks and months.
The standing feet of water hasn't stopped investigators from finally obtaining intact video from local businesses, with security cameras pointing towards the lot where Crystal's car was dumped.
The pieces of the puzzle were all fitting together.
On video collected by police, a man can be seen not far from where Crystal's car was found, and just hours after the woman went missing.
And it was obvious that the person kept looking in the direction of where that Mercedes was parked.
And the man looks eerily familiar.
And lo and behold, there was Steve, her ex-husband.
So from that aspect there, we identified who our person of interest was narrowing down to.
But police wonder, why would Steve kill Crystal? And if he dumped her and ditched her car, how did he make it more than 10 miles back to their house? So investigators keep scanning collected video for any additional clues. That's when they find their answer.
We ended up collecting some video where that same person of interest was seen with a bicycle.
The more everything focused towards Stephen, the more the evidence mounted and built against him. It was pretty evident at that point that Uncle Jeff, Paul had nothing to do with it. It was all Steve.
Though authorities believe Stephen McDowell has killed his ex-wife Crystal, it may mean little in a court of law.
If you don't have the body, all you got is speculation at that point.
If Crystal has been murdered, you definitely need a body to convict someone of the crime. So another sense of urgency comes from the fact of, okay, we need to find the body before it's washed to a location we can't reach or before wildlife elements get to it. Because with weather to the magnitude of Harvey, it can literally wash away the case.
Hoping he'll reveal where Crystal's body is, they bring Steve McDowell down to the sheriff's office. Investigators show Steve the surveillance video they have of him near the motel where Crystal's car was dumped. Surprisingly, he admits it's him on the video, but refuses to confess to anything more.
Steve was very cocky. He would sit there. You could ask him a question. Nope, nope. And then show him a picture. Okay, is this not you? Yeah, that's me. And?
It's almost like he's playing a game. He's giving them more and more information, but he's not giving them what they're looking for.
By early September, the water in Baytown has finally started to recede. And police have the opportunity to launch a search party for Crystal's remains.
It was very, very important to us that we get the body located and found. Not just from the criminal justice side of it, but also for the family's sake.
You want her family, her kids, to be able to lay her to rest and have some kind of peace later in life.
The sheriff calls upon Texas EcuSearch, an experienced volunteer search and rescue organization to comb the many wooded areas in the region. Tim Miller, founder and director, leads the search.
We've been called many times by law enforcement, by Texas Rangers, even by the FBI.
One of our biggest fears was if she was dumped in one of the rivers or bayous or creeks, she'd be halfway out in the Galveston Bay.
It was one of the most difficult searches we've probably done.
The weather was still playing a major roadblock for the investigation, trying to find a body under these circumstances. She could be partially buried, trapped against a tree. She could be completely buried or just floating in the water.
Without the body, it's pretty difficult to get an indictment, let alone a conviction.
So really, it's now or never, and the time is ticking, and they have to find her as soon as possible.
But authorities are about to learn that the aftermath of Harvey is not their only worry.
This was the big turning point. Steve knew that this was it. Either he was threatening to kill himself or kill the kids.
After Crystal McDowell went missing, Baytown, Texas is still trying to recover from the devastation caused by Harvey. Even though investigators from the Chambers County Sheriff's Office believe Crystal's been murdered and her ex-husband Steve McDowell is responsible, he's far from confessing. And authorities learn that Steve may be a danger to more than his ex-wife.
The family had told us that Steve made a statement that he would potentially hurt the kids.
Paired with previous witness allegations that Steve had threatened suicide, authorities fear their children are in serious danger.
We needed to remove the kids from the house for their own safety.
Luckily, Child Protective Services finds the children unharmed and quickly places them with another family member. The following day, investigators bring Steve in yet again for additional questioning. But he has a change in attitude.
He essentially lost everything that was near and dear to him. He lost the love of his life, and now his kids are gone.
Through tears, Steve recounts how it all happened. On the morning of August 25th, Crystal left her boyfriend's house and arrived at Steve's around 7:30 a.m. to pick up their kids.
And in Stephen's mind, he still thought them as a family. That's the way his mind was working.
But Crystal then uninvited him from the upcoming cruise.
I think what finally broke him was this guy, Paul. She really liked this guy. She pops up at the last minute and tells Steve that he's not going. She's taking Paul, and she's going to introduce the kids to Paul. And I think Stephen finally saw, okay, this is the end of the road.
They got into an argument, and as it was described by him, he attacks her from the back.
Steve wrapped his hands around her neck and strangled her, while their two children were asleep in another room.
He just decided to do what he wanted in that moment, take her life, because in his mind, if he couldn't have Crystal, no one could.
Steve then placed Crystal's lifeless body in the trunk of her own car.
And that's where it stayed until he had his opportunity later. He disposed of the body late Friday night, early Saturday morning.
While the kids slept, Steve drove Crystal's car and disposed of her cell phone in advance of the coming storm.
He dumped her body in a wooded area near their home, and then he drove her vehicle several miles away to a motel with hopes that someone would steal the vehicle.
Luckily, Harvey foiled his plan.
He didn't anticipate that it was going to rain so much that the car would be flooded and no one could take it.
The minute he told us that he had killed her, the first thing we wanted was, will you take us to the body? And he said yes.
Steve shows police the densely wooded area off an access road where he dumped his ex-wife's body more than 2 weeks before. Without Steve's confession, it's unlikely that Crystal's body would have ever been found.
Just to put it as politely as I can, there was 35 pounds of her left. You could tell that she had been drug around by animals, picked off by animals. She was not recognizable.
So it appeared as though the body was certainly put closer to the road. Rain came in and her body was actually floating away.
Crystal's body was discovered by the Chambers County Sheriff's detectives and Texas Rangers in a wooded area of West Chambers County.
It seems like Steve is a person who's a master manipulator, if you will. If Steve doesn't get what he wants, he will throw out something to get his way. When his wife wanted to leave him in 2008, he threatened to kill himself. And then in 2017, when she had the courage to walk away, he took her life. And in order to get away with that, he tried to use Hurricane Harvey as a way to commit the perfect crime.
I think Steve McDowell took advantage of a situation of the weather. Weather is ultimately what made it very difficult for us to investigate the crime.
On September 9th, 2017, Steve McDowell is charged with capital murder and indicted 1 month later. In the case of Crystal McDowell, a missing person turned murder investigation, weather played a crucial role, both aiding and crippling the investigation.
Crystal was such a shining light. She took everything bad and turned it into good.
You can't stop storms from coming, and that's true in the hurricanes, that's true in life. But I do feel like this brought some people together because it makes them appreciate the people they love in their lives. I need to tell this person I love you today because tomorrow you may not have that chance.
Working so many forensic cases, Hurricane Harvey, it certainly was a unique opportunity to cover up such a heinous crime. But also, to solve this case,